So with ArmCare.com, they wanted to show us everything about it, why you need it, why it's so important to the game and keeping you healthy. Y'all take it away.
Awesome. Listen, I'm super excited being here, watching Brent put his education on. The one thing I wanted to do is actually meet the skeleton because I think it's a great prop. His name's Jimmy. I don't know if you got the name from Brent, I'm sure he's talked about it, but I also got to recognize his man Alex, who's putting up this production. There is so much that goes into what Brent does. He's a hard worker, and he puts a lot of great content out. But my basic specialty is in elbow injuries. And a lot of people in the world, they focus on the shoulder, but in baseball, we're having way more elbow injuries than we are the shoulder, okay? And it comes with velocity enhancement. And the one thing that I love here at TopVelocity is that they're using our product. They're making sure they're assessing fatigue in their athletes. They're making customized program. They got a ton of key performance metrics to ensure that the athlete does gain velocity, but they also stay healthy. That's the thing. People might not know this, but biomechanically, 1 mile per hour, you increase, you got an increase of load by 1 unit, and you combine that by thousands of pitches over the course of the season, you're putting like 1,000 or 2,000 Newton meters of load on the elbow. So it's important to be able to monitor. That's what we do. I mean, our motto is throw fuzz, but my particular saying is strength matters most. Strength matters most. We got to worry about strength first, then mechanics. I'm going to go to a little bit of anatomy because I love this. When you look at elbow injuries, you got to understand a couple things about the elbow. Now, it's kind of tough to turn his shoulder, but this bump here is called your medial epicondyle. It's a real big word, but what happens is you got your UCL that attaches from the medial epicondyle to this part on the ulna, and we call this the ulna. The ulna is the bone side of your pinky, this inside part of your pinky. And what happens, what causes stress to the UCL is this opening. If you imagine your elbow's like a hinge, like a door, imagine you're pulling up on the door as it's bending and extending. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put tension on that thing. And the muscles that overlay the elbow are your forearm flexors and your pronator. And the one thing we test is the flexor digitorum superficialis. That's the FDS, okay? And that muscle helps our fingers flex as well. Our forearm flexors, they help our wrist and our fingers flex. And we test with these two fingers. So a full hand grip strength test doesn't necessarily give you the right information about elbow health. And you got to think about it too. When I hold a baseball, I got 2 fingers on top, a thumb on the bottom. And when you get to the maximum part of your layback, where the highest torque is, you're bending the elbow the most, we need to have strength in those muscles. That's what's keeping the ligament healthy. So, you know, as I get back into maximal external rotation, okay, you can see that I'm going to have some bending. The arm actually stops when we're going to layback, and we need to have control of the forearm because what happens then is that you're going to put that stretch on your ligament. This is why we've got to have strong forearm muscles. It's shielding the ligament, and that's one of our tests that we do with ArmCare.com. So it's really good to have this anatomy. The other thing too that we see when you go to maximal external rotation, got to get this guy in the right place here. Got to turn him over. When we get to maximal external rotation, the wrist position can change from pronation to supination, okay? And you can actually get more range supinated. This means like I have my hand turned up, okay, opposed to pronated, turned down. And the reason being is you're going to tighten up your bicep. Your bicep's going to be more contracted, and if it's not in a relaxed, loose state, which it is when you're in a supinated position, you won't get as much layback. But when we get to that layback position with a supinated wrist, that also can create a little more stretch, a little more opening on the elbow. So it's important why we got to monitor strength. And there are connections, and I'm going to go through this at certain points in our presentation that we're giving today. We're giving an ArmCare performance clinic. I'm going to do some exercising as well. I'm going to show you some drills later on in the day, but we have to make sure the shoulder is really strong because when that arm's laying back, especially if we're doing a really high velocity layback speed, you know, if you're using weighted balls, and some guys like to do reverse throws, okay? that means that that arm is hurling back at a faster rate, okay? It's going backwards at a faster rate. And if you think of your arm like a catapult, you're pulling that thing back quickly. You got to have the strength in the hinges to handle it. And that's what happens with the shoulder, okay? And when I go into this, this education, a lot of baseball players, at least at the pro level where I've been there, they have tremendous strength on the backside of their shoulder. And it does make sense to a degree because when they release the ball, those muscles at the back, they got to keep the shoulder in its socket. All these muscles compress the shoulder joint when it's accelerating. It's got to stop. There's a point in the delivery, actually, where you're releasing the ball that your shoulder is in a fixed position to create the friction, to create spin, but those muscles have to be strong. Okay, that's our support of that group. But one of the other things that we need to know is that when we're laying that catapult back, we have to have strength on the inside, our internal rotation strength, okay? And it actually has to have strength while it's lengthening. You gotta think, if my arm's going back, the only way to stop it are the muscles on the front. And so if you've got a program that is highly focused on the posterior side of the shoulder and you're not assessing all the different muscle groups, we talked about the FDS, our pinch grip, that muscle goes right over the UCL. If we're not looking at all that, we're gonna create extra stretch on our ligaments and our passive structures. So it's important that you have a very, very, very individualized program, okay? And you need to do that with assessment. I'm playing this up on the board behind me. It's an amazing setup. It's great for education because there's a projector and you can see this really clearly. But I want you to take a look at what this technology is about. For a very low price point, you have your clinic in a case. And what's good about facility, especially like looking at TopVelocity, they work with a ton of athletes. And if they're not here and they're away from you, you can at least stay up on throwing arm strength changes and fatigue. That's super important. And it can be done anywhere. And you get the report, and then you know how to individualize. I always say that generalization equals hospitalization. I think like 99%, maybe even 100% of injuries are caused by not having an awareness of the data and not creating customized programs. A lot of the times, you'll see when you go into certain areas where they train, not here, that athletes are doing all the same things, okay? And it's good for some athletes, it's bad for others. You might overtrain some, you might undertrain some, where we need to make sure our programs fit the athletes, okay? And they don't have to fit our programs. That's huge. I'm gonna go to the whiteboard real quick, okay? One of the things that people always ask me is they say, you know, what is the biggest cause of injuries in baseball, okay? And it's quite simple. When we look at the metrics, you ask certain people to say, okay, what's important to pitching? K9, FIP, WHIP. They throw out all different types of acronyms, stuff grades, ball flight characteristics, spin axis. You hear it all. But the most important metric to me, the primary one, is innings pitched. Because when you get to a certain level, you need those pitchers to be able to stay on the field to win games. But when I dive down and I want to look at how efficient pitching works, the first place I look is not biomechanics. And I have a biomechanics background. It is this metric right here, pitch efficiency, PE. And some people don't know what that means. You hear efficient delivery, people talk about it. Is it visual? Is it if the guy doesn't get tired when he throws? There needs to be a definition. So for me, what makes really great pitchers, ones that exist in the game for a very long time, they have to have a concentrated effort on pitch efficiency. Okay, pitch efficiency is basically pitches per inning. I'll say it again, pitches per inning. We know to be a successful pitcher, you need to be in games. We can't look at baseball saying we're going to take away from this player. Okay, you don't want to take the workload away from the player. You want to be strategic. But one thing that gets them going on year after year, making their starts, making money when they want to go into either getting a scholarship or going to play at the professional level, is being able, okay, to do more with less. Being able to throw less per inning, okay, but compete in more games, more game appearances. That is huge. All right, so that is a real big factor for me as far as an efficiency grade. And remember, I'm focused on innings pitched. That's just me. I'm a health guy. People ask me, what do I care about more? I think velocity is huge for competitive opportunity. But if you're not on the field, or you're going to be able to play for a long time in your career, you need to stay on the field, okay? And the other thing that people don't know is what's the predictor of surgery, all right? Surgery just doesn't happen. You just don't get an exploding elbow all of a sudden, okay? It comes from micro damage, damage that occurs over time that doesn't get healed, okay? And so what we need to do is we need to prevent the primary injury. Strength matters most. We need to keep our ligaments healthy, our passive structures healthy. We have to focus on strength because the secondary injuries, okay, those ones lead to more catastrophic results, like having a surgery. Now, if you have a surgery and you go into a revision, all right, especially for the elbow, your rate of return is going down. Here's the problem with the world of baseball, is that in the medical community, they are advancing at a much faster rate than we are at the preventative community, okay? So our surgical approaches are becoming so good that players are getting back at about a 90% level. But the thing is, you're going to be missing tissue that God gave you. And if you have a surgery at a young age, let's say you're 18, you got a Tommy John surgery, people don't know this, on average, they only last about 4.5 years. They really do. The ones that you guys see that are successful, the major league players, there's been studies to show that major league players that have Tommy John surgery, they have a longer outcome for their career, all right? The younger players, you don't hear about those guys because a lot of them get released when they have surgeries, okay? And a revision surgery is not something you want. Again, I'm going to keep saying it. It is my motto. Everything I write newsletters for armcare.com, strength matters most. We have to prioritize it. Now, I got to tell you about why guys get injured, okay? I told you pitch efficiency is important to preventing it, but I'm going to shoot a slide up on the board up here on the screen. If you can see it, you're going to look at your eyes like dead beat in the middle of this thing, all right? Fatigue is the biggest risk factor. And there's one study, they looked at it in youth athletes, but I think it's even more as you get to professionals, is throwing under a state of fatigue or potentially a sore arm. That is a big issue. Now, when you go around the wheel, I've been researching this stuff since 2006 when I started my Ph.D. program at the University of Buffalo. And I looked for studies that had actual good data to show a difference between healthy and unhealthy pitchers, okay? I have a segment that I do on LinkedIn. I'm a LinkedIn guy. This is all new for me on Instagram, where I talk about ArmCare FX. It's a small, quick bite, 2 minutes long, but the FX is a play on word for effect size. So you can look through research, but there's one metric called the effect size metric, and it's the most important stat in science to show you how big a difference are there from two groups, all right? So I'm showing you here, from what I've read, the percentage of studies that I've read that have the highest effect size. So you go around the wheel, range of motion. There's some effects there. About 15% of the studies that are out there show a pretty decent effect size, a big difference, okay? Workload scheduling, I've done a ton of it, okay? A ton of research there. And I will tell you, at the major league level, competitive pitch counts, they don't matter, all right? We didn't see anything. We did a long study looking at predictive element of competitive pitch counts. They weren't very strong, and they haven't been shown to be really effective in college. And one of the reasons being is that they are general, okay? They're general. How is it that Brent, Jordan, the guys in here who are starting pitchers, why do we always have 100 pitches? Why is that magical number, right? So they assessed it. They say, okay, well, if a pitcher's doing really well and they're throwing 15 pitches per inning, and they get like 7 innings, that's a pretty good measure. That's not good enough. That's why I like strength matters most, because we need to know the arm strength, and we need to be able to individualize. Say it again. Individualization is more important than anything to prevent hospitalization. So this workload data and the way we're tracking pitches, it doesn't work. All right, that is not the killer. Now, biomechanics, that's crazy. I know that's crazy. I went to school, I got an exercise physiology, a split Ph.D. in exercise phys and biomechanics. My studies were mostly focused on biomechanics. All right, I don't love it for injury prevention. It is definitely involved in performance. Okay, you have to have certain biomechanical qualities to make you a really good player, okay? But when it comes to injuries, everybody throws a different way. They all throw a different way. And when I was in professional baseball, we had unbelievable models. Jordan's at the side here, but I'm going to give him props. This guy had digitized, I don't know, maybe 4,000 or 5,000 pitchers over the course of his time with the Angels. And we really looked at some things. We created a model of how to draft a biomechanically optimal or effective pitcher. And this was based on databases of our own athletes and guys that were really excellent pro pitchers. Now what happened is we didn't draft people that had their hand underneath their elbow, okay, or that inverted W or L or whatever you want to call that position. We didn't even draft those guys, all right? But we had them in the organization. And the strange thing is that the inverted W guys were not on our injured list. They were not, okay? And the very clean mechanics, you know, balls in front of their body, you know, you have tons of milliseconds to see the ball. We had a ton of them. We had a lot of the guys that we took on that ended up on the injured list. That's quite frightening. So I had to dive to the data, say, hey, all right, we got a performance model. Yeah, we might have brought in some guys that are, you know, they fit that performance model. But again, innings pitched, that wasn't happening. A lot of guys had their careers cut short, and it's kind of unfortunate. But when it comes to health, and like I'm saying, it's the strength aspect. You know, some of these guys, there are a couple things. You get a player that is hand under elbow at weight-bearing foot flat. The one thing you got to look at is how long does that arm take while it's down, and then you have opening of rotation. That is a big issue. That's something that needs to be corrected, all right? But we need to fit our programs to those pitchers, because one thing that can happen, Jordan's over here, but he can attest, is we went to arm path right away for a lot of our pitchers. And when we changed arm path, guys, it put them at even more risk. You know, and so there's certain instances where you need to do that. It's kind of it's the lower end, at least from what I've seen. But if we created an individual process for that delivery, and everybody's got their own, we got to create our own ArmCare programs based on, you know, their arm slot, or if they're hand under elbow, this would be a guy that, you know, if my hand's got late timing, you got to think to yourself, is his layback going to be slow or fast? It's pretty easy. I'm moving this way, my arm's here, I'm opening early, my arm's got to be pretty rocket fast. And I showed you with our guy Jimmy, the skeleton, when the arm opens, right, that's going to put some more stretch on the UCL. So what do you do with that athlete? Okay, well, they need a little bit more eccentric internal rotation strength. They got to be able to brace that. The arm's got to be able to stop and lay back to not create a huge amount of bend with the forearm while it's rolling forward, to put stretch on the ligament and the muscles. But they also have to have the FDS strength. This full grip strength, we get it in a lot of things. Gripping barbells, pull-ups. We need more finger strength. Can't stress it enough. Finger strengthening, finger flexion with these two fingers and thumb, really, really important. I'm going to go to another slide for you, okay? We got fatigue, weakness, compensation. This is a mechanism. So when we say mechanism, that is the process in how athletes get injured. I talked about strength matters most. Strength matters most means you're not going to be fatigued. That's the beginning of the cycle, all right? In the middle is weakness. So you get fatigued, your muscle strength is going to change. And then we have compensation, all right? So I'm going to go to my guy Jimmy. And what we might have is, you know, arm doesn't go that high because the scapula doesn't move on this guy, unfortunately. But over time, what might happen is, okay, he gets the maximal external rotation. Now, he's not at that nice 90-90 position. His arm starts to fly out a little bit there. He's a little bit fatigued, okay? So he's made a change. Or, you know, what can happen is he might pinch in, okay? So he might actually flex closer to the ear. He might bring the ball closer to the ear. There's a lot of things that can happen. The arm lowering, the rib cage, early opening, okay? Not catching up, the arm lagging too far behind. Those aspects are going to cause increased loading on this UCL, right here. It's going to open up that joint, okay? The door's bending, you're pulling up on the hinge even more. It's going to create the compensation. How do you block it? That's key. Right there, okay? The ArmCare device, it is in the platform. It's a real simple explanation. This is a cost-effective way a player can put this in their bag and identify their fatigue. Coaches can follow it, and they can understand how I'm going to make individualized adjustments, because you're breaking the cycle. And you know when you have to recover an athlete or when you need to dial up or dial down. That's huge. We need to be able to have that. That is a really important feature. And right now, most people are walking around not knowing how fatiguing their throwing programs are. They're not knowing in their athletes where their muscular deficiencies are. And the athletes are going into a gym and it's just a whiteboard. So Alex, Brent, Jordan, you know, the guys that are in here training, super hard. Yeah, here's the device. Thanks, Brent. They're going in there. Everybody's doing the same thing. Okay, and it's real simple. You wear it on your wrist, you press. I know I had the video, but I mean, look at this. This case goes in a backpack, your bag, you're in a hotel room. There's really no excuse, in my opinion, anymore to write generalized ArmCare programs. There is no excuse anymore with the amount of data that's in baseball and the affordability of some lower level technologies that give you good insights to not be evidence-led or data-informed in what you do. If you're winging it, you know, some people out there, they have great art in their practice of coaching players, but I'm a scientist, so one of the things I want to be able to get to this community is the concept that, you know, strength matters most, and the tools are there, let's use them. All right, so let's see how easy this is to use. Very simple, okay? You have three big areas of a throwing program, right? So first there's the pre-throwing exam that we have. That's just getting the athlete ready for the exam and getting some activation. And it looks like this. The first thing is the athlete walks in, all right? And that's a process in itself. Athlete can't come in with a bad mental state. You're not gonna have a good day. So one thing that they got here going on at TopVelocity, Brent's very connected with his athletes. He's a big-time business owner, but he knows his guys. And they come in, they communicate, they can tell him, hey man, I'm hanging today. There's a lot of information, okay, coming in the door. He's got to get them mentally ready. But then you go into the plan, all right, he's on the bullpen, and these dudes here, they don't throw slow. If you are living under a rock and haven't seen the videos that have been put out by this company, there's something wrong. You know, there's a radar gun in most of them. You're going to see big velo gains. The wall here has got some of the guys that have been showcased and the velocity gains they made. It's tremendous. But having that high intensity training day, you got to be able to screen. That's huge. So the guy comes in and they do some type of activation. Everybody has a certain way of getting the arm ready, okay? And we have opportunities to use our app to do that, or you can be very versatile and do it on your own. But here's the key. It's our arm primer, all right? Now our arm primer is a 1-minute test every day that allows you to make an adjustment to workload. It's our screen. So you're wearing it, you're in a half kneeling position, you're pressing against something immovable. That's our XL test. You're wearing it on your wrist. That's a decel test in the position that you release the ball. That's essential because, again, we want to be specific to the athlete. We got to be biomechanically specific in what we do, and we need to know where the strength lies. If I'm a side armor and I'm looking at my strength up here, and nothing against certain tests that are out there, but there's one that's very interesting using a force plate called an ASH test. But those tests are at a predetermined angle. So that means the athlete's got to be overhead at certain angles until they might reach a spectrum. But we need to give the freedom to be able to test anywhere, not using an expensive force plate, using a tool like this, where you can get the best information how the athlete throws. That is huge. So we do that arm primer. I'm going to get into it a little bit later on in the presentation. We might have to chop this up because this is going to be a long presentation. But the arm primer is being able to press, okay, maximally in the warm-up. And why do we do that? I think of it like jump starting your battery. All right, your battery is running, maybe it starts to slow down, it's losing juice, and then bang, you do your arm primer. That is what we call potentiation. Big fancy word by like amplifying the neural activity, the muscle contraction. What happens is when you do this maximal press, all right, in the arm, it dumps a whole bunch of calcium in your muscle cells, all right? Now the calcium are the things that allow your fibers to bind. So when you get a ton of calcium in your muscles, you got all these different fibers that are binding, okay, that help you contract. And that means when you're moving at high speed, you got more force, and more force is going to give you more power. So we do this early. The secondary element of this, so it's so important, is the exam, all right? We got to actually look at the muscle contributions Unlike the ASH test is a straight arm test like our standing XL and decel, but we got to decompose the strength. Is it the internal rotators, the external rotators, the forearm, our scaption test? We got to know these things, so we got to do an exam, all right? And then once we get there, hey, that data's in an app, we got a dashboard, real simple. This is where the coaches take over, all right? The tech's giving them insights. You know, this doesn't mean your medical guy or your strength guy goes out on the field and says, hey, you know, coach so-and-so, I think we need to do this. No, the coaches have this data on their app, on their phone. They're on the field, they're in the weight room, in the gym, wherever the athlete is, and they're being dynamic. And they're being dynamic in their program before the dynamic warm-up. You can go to the athlete. You know, one thing that bothers me, this is kind of an aside, it bothered me in professional baseball as a strength and conditioning professional. Pitching coaches, if you're listening, please do not walk on the field when the athlete is warming up with the group and disrupt his mental focus for the day, okay? It irritates the strength coach, and it does irritate the player because now all of a sudden, the group he's with are ahead of him. He's been thinking about things. We need to use our warm-up to get mentally prepared, okay? We need to use the warm-up to get mentally prepared. So by the time the exam's done, which takes 6 minutes, so 1 minute here, then we do our exam in multiple positions. Now it's 6 minutes. That data is right on the phone. The player's in there getting a drink, putting the uniform on, getting ready to go out, and the coach already has it. Guy comes out before dynamic warm-up. Hey, we had a 40-pitch pen today. You're going to throw X, Y, and Z. You're supposed to throw at max capacity. We're going to go to a 15-pitch pen. You're going to throw changeups and fastballs, and I'm going to keep the radar gun on you. We're going to dial it down for today. This isn't a day that I want to work on a fatigued arm, okay? Some cases, strength so bad, guy loses more than 8 pounds of strength, okay? In a muscle group, that's a lot of strength. 8 pounds is a lot of strength to lose. That coach might just punt the day and say, oh, let's do it tomorrow. So it makes them dynamic, okay? So now you get to the post-throw, and I'm going to end after this slide for this particular segment, but the post-throwing exam is the critical feature. I'm going to put something else on the board in a little bit that you're going to be able to follow. Why? Why is this post-throwing exam important? Now, in professional baseball, you're not really well staffed, okay? And players, you know, you got your medical staff on the field, you got your strength coach working with somebody, and they got really expensive equipment. It's not conducive to doing a post-throw test. But what's important, the player does this. We're giving the player ownership. Why do we have to handhold every single player in the game? Especially when they get to a major league level, they should have a process, and we need to get this to our high school kids and even younger to be able to develop that process, but they have to test after the game. And the reason why is you need to know how fatiguing was the workload on their arm. So when they throw 115 pitches in a game and they come out and their strength is actually 10% higher than baseline, they actually got potentiated, you know, hey, that kid's nervous system, real good. That's, you know, we don't need to take away from him. We're going to keep testing it, but he's showing us he's not fatigued. Other guys, they come out throwing that, they might lose 20% of strength. It's like, whoa, that level is not maybe optimal, you know, and comparing it to performance as well. Now, if they're throwing 115 pitches in the game, they're going deep in the game. They should be. But you need to assess this. And then after that, we get to the training and recovery. And we're going to do some training exercises and some things today. I'm going to be working with Brent. And, you know, that's the process. Player leaves, okay? And now that your recovery process also starts to continue. And those are behavioral, okay? Like you get your soft tissue work. You go home, even though you're doing foam rolling or some of the other soft tissue release in your training session at the end, you need to continue that way of mobilizing tissue and getting yourself to relax when you go home. Hydration, that's huge. You're gonna, like, this is hot in here. I mean, we're in Louisiana. We're in Covington, Louisiana, and this location is on Hard Hat Drive. That makes so much sense to me because these guys put in the work, but it's hot, all right? They're gonna sweat a ton. There's some dudes in here we can't show you. They don't have shirts on, all right? But they're dripping wet of sweat. And they're gonna be losing a lot of body water. So one thing that the athlete can do is before they go to the training session, they go, okay, I'm gonna step on the scale. All right, I weigh 200 pounds. After the training session, they come over, they stand on the scale and say, okay, well now I'm 198. Well, if you do the simple math, to get your body weight up, you gotta drink about 2 pounds of water, all right? In flow ounces in bottles. So you need to go and hydrate. And then nutrition, we need to educate our players, even if they're overweight, all right? and they're competing, and they're training in an environment like this, they need to have something ingested every 3 hours. And you think about this in a game, and I'm talking it's got to have the combination of protein, it's got to have a little bit of carbohydrate and some fat. Trail mix is awesome. I love it. Some guys even eat yogurt if they can handle it during games because it's easy to go down. But you need to have some type of nutrition because if you're going to be successful, you're going to lose steam, you're going to burn calories, you burn even more in the heat. You know, you're going to be burning a lot more, and you don't want to be dehydrated. These foods have salt in them, okay? The salt in the food is what's going to allow you to retain water, stay hydrated. And I always say to athletes, hey, what's easier to rip? It's either a steak in a package or beef jerky. Dry beef jerky, obviously, you can rip like paper, okay? And so hydration is huge. And then you got to go into a mental state of relaxation. One of the things that we talked about at Louisiana Tech, I was just there, brilliant people over there. They had an intern, or she was a grad student who will be doing some interning. She's into music, okay? And that's something too that players have to understand in their mental state, what calms their body, right? If I go home after a training session here where they probably got disturbed and all the angry music and the books playing here because these guys throw hard, I got to go home. I got to take that huge dump of adrenaline and put myself to sleep. So they have to figure out what is my relaxation. What am I going to listen to? It could be EDM for some people, some classical music, but you got to put yourself in the optimal recovery state. That's all I got for this segment. Thanks for listening.